Good afternoon or good morning, David.
Good morning, afternoon to you.
How are you doing?
I'm doing well. In
Good,
fact, I'm in Austin, Texas right now.
good. So I'm in London in the UK, and it's nice to catch you. So it's the morning now, right?
It is, yes.
Yes, lovely. So I've got something I want to just quickly to start. I thought would be a nice way to begin the podcast. It's from your book. It says just a little bit passage from your book, and it goes like this, and it's written under the part of Shavasana. It just says, "At the still point of the turning world, neither flesh nor fleshless, neither from nor towards, at the still point, there the dance is." I look forward to dancing with you at the Still Points podcast, David.
Fantastic.
Thank you for
I
coming
wish
on.
I could say I were the one that made that quote, created that quote, but those are not my words, as you well know.
No, of course, a wonderful T.S. Eliot. But I just think it's really when I read your book, when I think about you, I just always, and I've read your book many times over the years, I always come back to the fact that I ended up calling my yoga Charlotte Still Point. So,
Yeah,
so
it's
how are
interesting.
you? How are you?
I'm great. Yeah,
Good,
everything's good.
good.
Came out the other side of that 2-year tunnel that all of us were residing within.
I know, right? What 2 years was that? Last year I remember was
Uh,
2019.
Yeah, I don't know. It's just like a one long day, like Groundhog Day. You keep waking up, same thing happening.
Yeah, right.
Oh,
Is it good to be back out in the world?
it's great. Yeah, I will say that at first there was a bit of reluctance, or almost fear to go back in the room with people,
Was there?
but everything seems to be fine. I just nearly saw you in London. We had a near miss encounter there,
Almost.
but yeah, I'm back on the road. I've been a few places out and about.
Right. Good. So, and it feels good to be back. When you said it was a little bit kind of, you're just a little bit unsure. What do you mean by that?
Oh, it feels great. What do I mean by being unsure? Is that what you
Yeah.
said?
Yeah.
Well, just with COVID and all that, it wasn't for a lack of desire for human contact. It was just we were all so programmed that, what is this
Mm,
environment? And it's not just me, but, my wife, family, whatever.
sure.
So, and it's not even just in the yoga room, it's on airplanes and when you're sitting next to someone for 10 hours and all of that stuff.
That's
But
it.
no, it's great. I love being back in the room with people, and will say that. I mean, maybe you did a lot of zooming during that time as well, which is something I said I would never do. Oh, I
Mm.
won't ever teach online. I'll only be in room with people. And then, of course, we were forced into this circumstance, and I learned to embrace Zoom because it was kept this thread of connection.
Mm.
However, I realized for 2 years I was teaching people, two-dimensional people that were 2 inches tall. And so when I stepped back in a room and there were life-size three-dimensional beings, at first I was like, "Woo, wow.
What do I do
It's
with
easier to see your
you?
body now. You can see the whole thing rather than looking at tiny little toes and stuff on that screen."
Mm. I was the same
And it
as
was
you.
beautiful. I think that from the student standpoint as well, there was a hunger, to be in physical proximity to each other.
I think you're right. I think we all kind of like what I saw that we all needed at the time was just to come together. Interestingly, we still have like a little online community which is still going, and it's because it's serving them in a certain way. It's serving them in a way that kind of still nourishes them. And I think what I found by moving online, I'm the same at you. I remember sitting on that first Saturday when we after lockdown, looking at everyone going, what do I do now? I've never had
Right.
nearly
Now
90,
what?
90 people looking back at you and then what? And it just feeling really disconnected. And so I thought, how do I make this connection work? And we did. And it felt to me more about how do we connect through this? Not like I'm teaching something and you lot are there just receiving it. It's almost like we're trying to work out what it means to connect together at this time, which felt really vulnerable for everyone. And so I think it asked me at least to kind of dig a bit deeper about getting over myself and think, well, what can we do to connect on this platform? And like I said, we still have a small community of people, which it still really, really works for them. Still really something really deep. Still lots of deep friendships made. So,
Well, also if you realize the pool of people that want to do yoga and the percentage of those people that have a yoga studio near them, that's not a lot of people, right?
yeah.
So there's a huge number of people that this is their access. And even if they do have a yoga studio near them, well, they didn't have access to this massive array of different teachers that were suddenly just boom, you can click on and experience different teachers without leaving your home, and even the prices were more accessible, and so it certainly opened things in a way that could not have really been perceived before. Prior to that, it was a DVD or something, right?
It's your DVD. How did it feel for you? How did it change you? Did it change your teaching in any way? Like being online or being on Zoom?
Well,
like, feeling like
certainly,
you had to do it, feeling like you had to do it. You had to change something in yourself to be able to connect, right?
well, certainly there's something different, particularly for teaching Ashtanga, because Ashtanga yoga is a lot of hands-on. So you eliminate that because I can't reach through the screen, right? At least not yet. That'll probably be the next technology. But
Yeah.
So it was learning to be acutely aware by looking at general lines of energy on people and giving specific verbal cues. And so that, even though we can do that when we're in person in a room, it brought it to another level. You have to be succinct. You can't go prattling on about something, especially when there's a flow. You have to figure out just the precise words to use. I will tell you something that I found pleasant and as a surprise was how wonderful it was to see people in their home environments when they're practicing, which you don't get that in the studio. Everyone's the same.
Yeah.
Yeah, they have some different, somebody's wearing Lululemon, someone wearing Prana clothes, but they're basically everybody's the same in the room.
Yeah.
With Zoom, wow, you get a whole nother sense of the student because you see their environment. Not only their environment, but I'm sure you also discovered you had to give instructions, or I had to give instructions I thought would never come out of my mouth in a yoga class. Scott, don't jump back. Your cat is on your mat. Or your child just wandered into the room. Or when you come out of this posture, remember your guitar is on your left and your bicycle is on the right. Don't crash into them, right? Like,
Yeah.
but it was fascinating just to see the environments and the degrees that people had to rearrange their lives in order to do yoga at home also.
I also found that you could get people to use their couches and their tables as props.
Yeah, there are all kind of
You're
new
like,
options.
oh, you can't do it. Put your hand on that thing. See, and they get this
Right.
that lovely new room.
Exactly. So now in class, I'm sure, yoga studios will start bringing couches and
Yeah, exactly.
chairs and
I think I saw
clothing, dressers and things into the room.
a new Lululemon range with like they're doing
That's right. New
sofas,
kinds of props.
sofas with mats next to them that you can roll out.
That's right.
Anyway, here we are. Thank you for coming on. I really appreciate it. I want to begin, although we begun, but I want to continue the conversation by asking you, and this is kind of the same kind of question I give to all my guests. When was the first moment? When was the moment that you knew that yoga or contemplative practice was going to be the way you would move your life, the way you would live your life? And you said, or when you're doing something that related to yoga or meditation, and it changed you so much that you were like, this is how I'm going to live. This is how I'm going to move in my world.
Well, I can specifically speak to my first encounter with yoga. I cannot say precisely the moment that I was like, wow, this is it. I'm in it for the rest of my life, because it was something that just naturally unfolded. It wasn't like a moment of epiphany or a lightning bolt that came blasting down into me and I saw my future. It wasn't like that. I was living in Texas. I was 13 years old. I have two siblings, both older. My brother's 5 years older than me, and my sister is 8 years older. And so my brother was a surfer in Texas. There's a coast in Texas. It's called the Third Coast. Many times people refer to it as that in the US. Um, and in the summers, he would go to California. And out there, he discovered yoga and health foods and things like that, and came back to Texas doing this kind of stuff. And he had a book. And I would be surprised if any of your listeners have heard of this yoga book. The first one we had, it's called Yoga, Youth, and Reincarnation by Jess Stern. Yeah, and we had that. It had a handful of asanas. And so he's my big brother. And I wanted to do what he was doing. He was doing healthy things. So just by luck or fate or whatever, I followed his footsteps. And we would do the yoga, and it was part of one integral part of other things that were percolating within us, eating healthy foods, being connected to nature, because there were no yoga studios. So we practiced outdoors under a tree, feeling the wind and seeing little insects and birds and trees and breathing the fresh air. And it did something inside that it just felt right. And after the whatever yoga we were doing, I'd feel like a yoga high. We called it a yoga high. You just feel this calmness. And that was something I liked and pursued. And because of that feeling, so far in my life, I've never done any drugs or even drinking alcohol. And I have nothing against those things because, you know, everybody I was around was doing all that stuff. But I wanted that feeling again that I got from yoga. And so rather than thinking this is my path or something, it was just like, I want that. I want to feel that. And that's what kept me going forward. So, and it wasn't some conscious, mystical, spiritual choice. I guess in a way you could say it was selfish. It was like, oh, that felt good. I want to do that again. Right? And so that's how it went.
That's very nice. So at 13, you had this natural high. You know, all of your friends are going like, just the hippie year of time. So, you know, like
Yeah.
everyone's saying,
Well,
try this.
all of my friends.
Try this, David. And you're going, no, actually, I'm just breathing deeper. That's enough for me.
Well, that was it. Everybody, especially then, you know, it was the late 60s, early 70s. There were all kind of drugs happening. There were the chemical-based drugs that people were taking, LSD and barbiturates and amphetamines and stuff. But then there were the sort of organic ones like marijuana and hashish and mushrooms. Because in Texas, there's cows poop. On the poop, mushrooms grow. And somewhere back in history, some human looked at that and said, that looks interesting. I'm going to eat that. And then had an experience. And after that, everybody else wanted to do it. So they were always trying to get me high. And actually, for a while, they thought I was a narcotics agent because I would go to all the parties with my friends where they were all partaking in this stuff. And I'd just watch. Oh, Swenson, I think he's a narcotics agent. And friends that knew me go, nah, he's just weird. But, you know, he'll drive you home after the party. And one of their excuses was, well, it's organic. Yeah. And I said, well, man, poison ivy is organic too. I don't want to eat it, but okay. And then they would describe for me, figuring it would further enhance my desire to join them was, and people talked like this in the 70s. Wow, man, like you gotta eat the shrooms, man. You know what I mean, man? You eat the shrooms, it'll open your chakras, man. It's like an elevator, man, going through your chakras. It'll open your crown chakra at the top of your head, man, like a lotus flower opening, dude. And like the cosmos will pour into you, man, like you'll be talking to God. And I'd say to them, I truly believe that you truly believe that you just had that experience. I don't doubt that. However, I see you the next day. You look like you don't feel that great. Your life's still kind of messed up. So yoga gets me high, man, is what we used to say. But I don't say I'll never do it. I mean, who knows? I just figure, why take drugs when you're in your early part of your life, when your brain synapses are firing and everything? Maybe it should be the retirement home. Turn 85 and the last years of your life is just a big raving
Just
party.
get smashed up. I mean,
Why
this is
not?
amazing to think that right from an early age, 13, you had a propensity for clean living and wanting just to be fresh. And like, I wonder where that come from.
I think that it was just intuitive. And like I said, my brother was doing it, but it was, I like to feel good, and I wanted to put things in my body that made me feel good. And of course, there's people that were doing the smoking pot and everything. That was another thing. Is that, well, I don't want to put smoke in my lungs. Yeah, it's marijuana, but I still didn't want to put smoke in there. Well, you can drink the tea. There's all they always had the argument against, but I just
Yeah.
Eventually people accepted it, that I was just weird, and it was just this thing that I felt, and I don't know where it came from, but even I'll say, coming back to the yoga, it felt right. And I don't know if this makes us think of, did we have past lives or something? It's like some little kid that climbs up on the piano bench and starts playing the piano and feels like they've done it before.
Mm.
And yoga felt a little like that. It just felt like a natural thing to do.
Yeah, it's almost like it just felt natural. And then like you've met something and it's those two things are met and it's kind of expanded. It doesn't need to expand anything. It just going. I love that you're just going with that sense of this just feels right. So what happened when did you like really, what happened? Did you get into like did you carry practicing it and then did you do work, or did you just when did you start really studying it?
Well, I started studying it from that first day because we had these books. We would read the book and then read the postures, open the book and go under a tree and do the yoga. One of the next books we got was Swami Satchidananda's Integral Yoga. BKS Iyengar came out with his book, Light on Yoga, around this time. And we had these books. And so we would read about the postures, but also there's the philosophy and ideas, which opened our mind to other things. And I was very into health foods. And there was a whole genre of health food book authors at the time: Paul Bragg, Arnold Ehret, Ann Wigmore, all these Victoris Kulvinskas, all of these different people. I was giving book reports on those schools, on those books in high school. And it was just a path that somehow opened to me, and I just kept taking one step in front of another. I had no idea where it's leading. It's not like I had a plan. And I never wanted to be a teacher. Well, first of all, there was nobody to teach. I mean, there weren't other people interested in yoga. So I've done all manner of other jobs. I've done landscaping. I will dig holes to plant trees, or I've been a waiter. I've been a car salesman, whatever, to make a living. It was only later that teaching yoga became a viable possibility.
I've read somewhere that like, oh, it might be another interview that you'd started with, were you so into Bhakti yoga?
That I started with
So
Bhakti yoga?
you studied Bhakti yoga.
I studied it. Yes, I did. Yeah, I lived it beyond studying it, because it wasn't, it was an immersion where I learned about Ashtanga in around 1973 or 74 from David Williams and Nancy Gilgoff in Southern California when I was just 16. And I dove fully into that and ended up going to India in 1977. And I got through all of the sequences and system of Ashtanga yoga by the time I had left India, which then opened all of these questions like, well, we have this goal, like I want the next posture, the next series, and then, somehow in our head we think something's going to happen, right? Or we look at these limbs, yama, niyama, asana, pranayama, pratyahara, dana, dhyana, samadhi, and we want to measure, where am I on this tree, right? And so I started questioning, well, what, I've got all these asanas, what's the meaning of life, and blah, blah, blah. And it sent me on this quest where I started studying all sort of things, St. Francis of Assisi writings, and I read the Desiderata, and I fasted and all this stuff. And at some point, I found my way in a Hare Krishna temple. And they had answers to all of these questions that were burning within me. And so I decided that either I was being a hypocrite and I really didn't want to know the answers, or I had to try. So I became a Hare Krishna and dove in 100%, shaved my head for 5 years. I chanted Hare Krishna. I renounced asanas. I had Brahmin initiation, chanted Gayatri 3 times a day, all of that, you know. So certainly I did go into Bhakti Yoga in a very big way.
And you weren't practicing Ashtanga while you were doing that?
Well, I was told at the time that asanas were illusion and Maya, and they would attach me to this material world because it was physical based. And I wanted to fully experience this path. And so I followed that advice and renounced my asanas.
And what did you discover, like doing that in that 5 years of doing that
Well, you know,
completely new, different practice?
I discovered a lot of things. I'm actually writing a book about my life's journey. And I discovered things on so many different levels. I did have deep, I don't know if you will say spiritual or experiences with that much chanting, in a day. But as a Hare Krishna life, it wasn't only about chanting, because people were encouraged to move into these temple communities, and temples require a lot of money. There's a community, so we had to go out and make money. And so for 5 years, they taught me to sell stuff. And so actually, one of the things I got was the ability to be a salesman. And then as I looked around the community, I realized from my personal experience that there was a lot of the same things that had turned me off to other religions, that there is a sort of a hypocrisy, where everyone within the circle of your community, you're all spiritual, and everyone out there is bad, and you've got to save them. But within that spiritual circle, I saw, well, there's egotistical people, there's humble people, there's mean people, there's nice people, there's all of that stuff. It seems like you've got the same chances out there on the streets of the world to find your spiritual nature as you do within the confines of this religion. And much of that realization came from observing my parents, that no matter what I did, exhibited unconditional love to me. And I started seeing spirituality in a different light, and decided that those 5 years, thank you very much, but I went on with my life and left, and came back with some other epiphanies that everything I was looking for I already had. We tend to feel that there needs to be this, or I won't say we, I'll speak for myself. I was looking for this mystical, idealized image of what it means to be spiritual, and a guru and all that, And so I found that and lived this life. But in the end, I was like, well, spirituality is not determined by the practice we do, whether it's chanting or asanas or sitting in meditation. All of those things just create fertility within us, like a gardener tilling the soil. If you've ever planted a garden, you take a shovel and you turn over the earth, you oxygenate it, you put compost and nutrients, and create this fertile environment within which we will plant seeds. All that practice means, whether it's asanas or chanting or whatever, means we are creating fertile ground. It's not spiritual in and of itself. The choices we make next determine our maturity of understanding. So we might do all kind of practice and then throw some ego seeds into the ground, and they will grow even larger than the average person because of this fertile ground. So the more practice we do, whatever that is, we need to become more aware as to what the seeds are we're planting. And these things came to me, and I will credit the Hare Krishna experience for both positive and negative experiences I had there to come to this level of understanding within myself. You know?
So you left the Hare Krishna community, and did you then, what did you do then? Did you jump back into the Ashtanga community?
Yeah, I landed back in I landed in Samastitihi on my mat. Boom. And I will say at the end of my Hare Krishna experience, actually, there were devotees, and even my guru at the time had me showing them yoga asanas because our bodies were falling apart. It was a rough lifestyle. I living like a monk, very simply. And the food was, overly cooked in a lot of sugar, and you're just feeling like, oh. And so the asanas started becoming a little more accepted within the Hare Krishna realm also.
Well, yeah, because they see the vitality it can bring, right? Sure. Yeah.
You could see that, well, yes, we are not our body. I accept that. And we are not this thing. However, it's a car. And you may as well take care of your car, change the oil, keep it clean, do what you need to do. And then you can do some service with that car. You can drive your car and deliver food to the homeless shelter and stuff like that. So yeah, take care of your car while you're also understanding I am not my car. So that idea that you could do asanas and not as something that might be detrimental to your understanding of bhakti was becoming acceptable.
So when you came,
so I started doing, I jumped right back into the Ashtanga I'd been doing before.
What did you notice anything different from having those 5 years from then going back into a strong Ashtanga practice just by chanting? And did you notice something new?
Oh yeah, I noticed a lot of things. And one thing is that the yoga had not changed. The sequence was there, the principles of it were there, but I had changed. And the lenses through which I viewed the world had adjusted in some manner. And so my understanding of the practice of Ashtanga, which I still do, changed. And I saw it with new eyes, but it was the same. And so many times it's like this. Maybe as a kid growing up, you got to go away from your family and come back, and then you appreciate them. Like, wow, mom, dad, I had no idea, how hard that was or whatever. And so my expectations, my understanding of the practice had evolved to the point that I could do it with a freedom and understanding that it's my medicine.
Yeah, that's a good shout. And I think what you can suddenly notice is it's your medicine, but you suddenly have all those years of deeply, contemplative and spiritual study to also, anchor and guide that as well. I'm sure, chanting those mantras and then, just then bringing that same quality perhaps to your practice is a vibration, right?
Well, there's a vibration, but now I don't draw a distinction between them. I don't see chanting as any different to doing an asana. Spirituality is not determined by the practice. Rather, spirituality is determined by the focus, the intent, and the action of the practitioner. The practice itself is just something we do for those moments in the day, but living it is something else. What do we do when you get off the mat or you finish, you spin that last bead through your fingers. Now you got to go out there and interact with the world. That's what tests our maturity of understanding. And so, as I say, I started looking at the practice of Ashtanga and seeing it as a holistic experience. And people say, well, you're just doing postures. And I say, well, there's asanas there, but we have drishti, which is a point of gaze. And so it's a distraction filtration system. It enhances the meditative aspects of the practice. You can be in a chaotic, crazy environment and you learn to focus in a specific point without analysis, and it allows you to be present and calm even in the midst of chaos. we have the sound of our breath, this ujjayi sound while we're breathing, which I decided is a universal mantra. And I don't know if you remember, I'll try to come back to this thread. You'll remind me of where I'm jumping off track here for a moment. But in 1999, many people were fixated on the calendar flipping over to 2000. And there were people like our beloved Prince, whom we've lost, Prince the musician, who said, let's just party like it's 1999. There were yoga people saying, let's all get together at midnight and do 108 sun salutations, which is not going to unite the planet. That's just going to unite a few hardcore people that want to stay up till the wee hours and bang out 108 sun salutations. And there were people saying, let's all say Om at midnight or do chanting. And I go, but that's going to eliminate huge populations of people. For instance, in Texas, where I'm from, no, they have different faith and religion. They're not going to want to say Om, or other countries or Muslims, that Oming is not something that is going to unite the planet. And so I thought about it and I realized it's breath. Breath is the thing that unites all humanity. It connects us with nature, with animals, with plants, this act of breathing. We all share this one breath. I've had people around the world create the sound of breath, and it's always the same. We can't breathe in Chinese or Swahili or English or Spanish or German. It's the sound of our breath. So I realized, well, in Ashtanga, it's our mantra. And we come back to that sound. So if the mind wanders, we come back to the sound. Yeah. And this sound gives us a lot of input on a physical level as well. If you hear me breathing like, oh, trying too hard, or if I've gone so deep that the breath is pushed out of my body, or if the breath is too shallow, my mind has wandered. So we have this mantra. We refine it for the rest of our days. We have awareness of energy in our body, bandhas, prana, life force. And if we add all of these facets, I call them the 5 elements of practice, bring them together, we have this holistic experience. And so that's how I started perceiving the practice, and it became a deeper experience.
Yeah, there's something really rich about what you said about the breath. I kind of look at it, you know, I when you say a mantra, would you just say the breath in, the breath out, or whether there's a count or anything like that? Or would you just say the breath itself is like the sound, is the vibration, is all you need to kind of hold on to?
The word mantra, Sanskrit word. Man comes from the word manus, which means the mind. Tra means to free or deliver. So free the mind. A very commonly known mantra is Om, right? Do you think if I was stressed out, that if I sat and said a few Oms, it would help me to relax? What do you think? Yeah?
Yeah.
So here I am. I'm a little stressed. I'm going to say a couple of Oms, so just bear with me while I help to focus my mind here. Om, 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 Om. I don't feel very relaxed. Oming doesn't work at all. I don't know what you're talking about. Or how about Om, 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 Om. This stuff doesn't work. Om, Om, Om doesn't work. Om, or Om. Same word, right? Is it really the word Om? Or is it the quality, the focus, the presence, the intent? Our breath is that way. We attempt to refine the quality, the sound, and the texture of our breath. It is our mantra, and it's universal. So by listening to the breath, it's no different than listening to that mantra. The mind wanders, come back to the task at hand, which is really what a meditation is, dhyana, right? Most meditations, I don't know of any meditation that will say, think of nothing. Rather, it's think of one thing. They'll give you a visual. Here's a candle flame, right? Or a flower, or this mandala, or a sound. Om or Hare Krishna, whatever it is, you're listening to that. You even have tactile things like the sense of the beads when you're engaging your senses. So Ashtanga has built within it this methodology of engaging our senses in the task at hand. It's just a tool. And
yeah,
go ahead.
I think you're right. I think it's really lovely to think around the breath a lot over a lot recently. Some in teaching, it's just been all about just saying to people, listen to the breath and feel it. It's double-edged. You get to hear it for your mind, but you get to sense it and feel it. And so you feel the energy of it and you hear the quality of it. And if you get those two things, that's it. There's the way that it can land in your body as a sensation. There's a physical sensation of energy, and there's the sound you can allow your mind to absorb and be focused in and lose itself into. And I think those two things for me have been really powerful.
Well, maybe you or some of your listeners have heard a presentation I've given called One World, One Breath. And in my feeling, breathing with awareness is a spiritual act. What is our first act of life that says we're here? I'm not saying when does life begin, because we'd have to get into a religious debate. But what is the first thing we do when we enter this world that says you're alive? You have to take a breath, right? The first thing. What is the last thing before death? We depart. We inhale in the beginning and exhale in the end. Life is really one breath, if you think about it. We, each and every one of us, are one breath away from death. And I've had people say, well, that's silly, David, watch. And they hold their breath for a while, and I go, yeah, but don't take the next one. Right? Even if you're really good at this, you might just get a couple minutes before you're gone, right? So one breath from death. That's how profound this breathing thing is. Yet we rarely, if ever, think about it, unless we're lucky enough to know about yoga or something where you start really contemplating this. And you look at the word for breath in many cultures, or some languages, I should say, are very similar to the word for spirit. Inspira, expira. German, ein Atmen, aus Atmen. It's also like Atmen in, Atmen out, right? And you get this sense that it's spirit. It's life. It's connecting us with past, present, and future. The aboriginals and original cultures of this planet were breathing these oxygen molecules moving in and out of their body and out into the atmosphere, which is circulating around the planet. It's right now connecting you and me. You're in London, I'm in Austin, but we're breathing this same air on this planet. And there's no such thing as Canadian air and American air and British air, that there's some big walls go up over each country and you have only your air. This oxygen is shared freely around the planet. It does not discriminate. So that breathing is connecting us all. It connects us with the future. Yeah. The air we're breathing now, it's still going to be cycling around. And so the idea of listening to the breath, it opens up all kind of possibilities. It connects me with nature. We exhale, plants take that in and share with us oxygen. It connects us with animals. It brings in environmental issues. If you pollute the air, who wants to breathe deep? I've taught in cities around the world that were so very polluted, and I'm teaching a yoga class, and I'd be like, well, inhale if you have to. I don't know, maybe mostly exhale, but it brings in so many issues, just this simple thing of breathing. So when we make that as the fulcrum of our practice, it unites us all.
Yeah, it's a really beautiful idea. It's a really beautiful idea that we're all that's, and it comes back to almost like, I think what I'm really working with at the moment, this idea that the nature of everything and the nature of us, and yoga is this kind of like us helping just us understand the nature of what it means to be human and the nature of what it means to be this person walking around in this body. Have you always is this something you always felt right from 13? And this is just yoga has just been able to kind of enhance and initiate more and more of this connection to
It's
the
hard to
world.
say how much I felt at age 13, and it's possible that all of this was in there, and it just took a few decades to understand how to say it or to see what's going on. But maybe it was percolating there before, you just didn't question it. But things start to happen, and I will say that that experience of all the chanting and all made me start looking at, well, what is universal? Because many religions, they tend to compartmentalize, and everybody outside the religion is bad and everybody inside is good. And I go, well, that doesn't make sense. There's got to be something universal.
Yeah.
And coming back to the year 1999, I created a program called Earth 2000, the First Breath. And it was my response to other people I'd mentioned that were doing oming and things to try to unite people and the planet. I said, well, I'll do one around breath. And the idea was, wherever you are on the planet, a couple of seconds before midnight, exhale. With that release of breath, let go of everything you need to release in your life. Any negativity, any sadness, and all of those things, just let it go. At precisely midnight, inhale. The first breath of a new day, a new dawn, a new millennium, new possibilities, a new birth. And that was the concept, simple. To my knowledge, it's the only program that everyone on the planet participated in. Obviously, the vast majority had no idea they were participating in it, but if they were breathing at the time, they were also participating in this program.
That I say, you did it. Everyone
Unbeknownst,
did it.
Unbeknownst to them, everyone on the planet did it.
Did the David Swenson program in the year?
Yeah, well, I won't even I won't even attach my name to it. We'll just say it was this breath thing. And it was simple, and due to its simplicity, I will say it seems that as humans, if things are too simple, we think it can't be deep or that valuable if it's that simple. And so you look at religions, and many times it's so complicated. When it becomes so complicated to be able to have a connection with spirit or God, it's like, and nothing against that, but I'm like, how does it have to be that complicated? So, and I don't even know, I won't claim that this was spiritual, but I'll say that it was a way of connecting and feeling present with everyone else. We tend to focus on differences, politicians and countries, and all of the differences that we have. Someone will have this faith or dress this way, or have this skin color and that skin color, or this sexual preference and that sexual preference and this identity and that one. And we fight about it and argue about it. Like, rather than look at the differences, man, there are far more similarities than differences. So maybe we can start with the one thing that is undeniable. We all breathe. And no one can say, I breathe through my ears or we breathe through some other way. We all breathe, and we're connected through this. Maybe start with that one commonality, that one little seed, and see what we can grow from that acknowledgement that we're really all the same and we're connected. That was the concept of Earth 2000, the First Breath. And there was this website that you could actually even calculate if you want to do it at the same time as everyone, because midnight in London is different than midnight in Austin, Texas, right? I had this, it showed every time zone in the world and cities that were in that time zone. So if you wanted to do everybody at the same moment, well, it might be 2 a.m. in London and whatever, 8 p.m. the day before in Texas, where you could connect with everybody and do that exhale at the same time and inhale.
Nice. So what a lovely idea. I think it's great. And I think this idea of it being like connected is really profound. And I love that idea about all of us connecting via the breath. I'm really interested in like your Bhakti, leaving the Bhakti community. Did you go into any other community, or did you kind of fall back into Ashtanga and just continue to just study that on your own, or did you go back and study with Pattabhi Jois?
Oh, I came back to just practicing and on my own. And at first I was like a closet yoga person. And I had a little bit of bah humbug attitude toward what I had perceived as spirituality. I was like, ugh, forget this, you know. And I was broke because I gave all my money to the temple. I lived like a monk. I just renounced everything and came out the other side. Like, what am I going to do? I have to make a living. What are my qualifications? You know, I've been chanting and stretching my body, you know, for the last decade. Um, that's when I realized, well, they taught me to sell stuff. So I became a salesman. I opened an art gallery. I was selling things, but secretly practicing yoga. Externally, I was a businessman. I carried a briefcase, wore business suits, would hand you my business card, but I was practicing yoga. But I didn't want it as my identity. It was just
Mm.
something I did there that felt good. And I did that for quite some time and ended up in Hawaii again, which is where a big part of the Ashtanga scene was happening. And I was working in an art gallery there. And I guess we could say in a sort of humorous way, I came out of the yoga closet, right? I came out and started going to public classes again with Nancy Gilgoff.
Mm.
And she brought Pattabhi Jois to Hawaii. I hadn't seen him for 12 years, but I'm doing yoga back in a room in this community. And the Ashtanga community is a loose knit community. It's not like an organization where we all, you know, have some, um, I don't know, board members and stuff. It's just we're friends. We connect when we connect. And his visits were always a moment for people to come together. And I saw him again. He didn't recognize me because I used to look different. I had long blonde hair down to my waist, and before he hadn't seen me for all those years. And so the first day practicing, he came to help me with the back bend. And when his hands touched my body, a little light bulb went off, it seems. And when I came up from the back bend, he says, "Oh, David Swenson." And he has this memory of my body and who I am. And he looks at me very closely and he puts his hands in front of his face, like mimicking playing little cymbals. And he says, "Hare Krishna, Hare Ram." So somehow he had known, because I hadn't seen him for 12 years, right?
Yeah.
And he welcomed me back and never really said anything else. But on my own, I was having all these epiphanies. And that's when I came up with these feelings of, wow, what is spirituality, right?
Mm.
Here I am on this mat. I landed right back where I started, like The Alchemist. If you've ever read Paulo Coelho's book, you end up right where you started and find out everything was there.
Mm.
And so all of this was coming into me, and it was through the practice that I felt this community. Just like breathing, I can feel like I'm close to you, even though you're in London and I'm here. Through my yoga practice, I felt like, well, I'm connected with all these other people all over the world doing it, even if I'm not in the room with them. And I'm connected with them through this breath, so I'm not alone. And so, in a way, I became part of this community, yeah, and felt a new appreciation for the practice as this tool in my life.
Mm.
And so it wasn't that I went from one community to another. It's just I went from um, being a member of a religion, and like I said, I learned a lot from it. I still have friends that are Hare Krishna people. I just visited some of them recently that are still there. Um, but I had my experience of that organized religion and felt like I had found something that better suited my spiritual needs.
Mm. And yet still, I suppose there's still the I mean, even though it's an organized religion, there's still the quality of the stuff that you practice and you absorb and the philosophies that are there, which are very similar to the kind of Ashtanga. I mean, Ashtanga yoga philosophy is just like universal, right? And so you still get to, I suppose, unpack that and see how it works in your life. But now you're able to do it in a way that suits you. And I think that's the beauty of yoga itself, right? You're able to take these philosophies and land them and move them and see and remember them in every moment individually.
Nothing is ever lost. Experience in life, positive or negative, becomes an integral part of us on a cellular level. So something we might have perceived as a bummer, at some point becomes an asset. The lessons learned, the fertile ground that we now have available to us from these experiences. So it's all becomes integrated. I haven't lost what I experienced as a Hare Krishna, and my understanding and expectations of Ashtanga have changed. I also no longer look at as the guru as a person. I think the guru is actually the practice, and the guru is not a person. And then, therefore, the duty of a teacher is to encourage and to inspire and to facilitate practice. You basically introduce them to the guru, which is not a person. You're introducing them to this practice, and then you facilitate that unconditionally and allow the person to use that practice and develop on their own. As soon as you make it a person, it's a bummer for the person you're laying that on, that now has this unrealistic expectation of what they have to be as a guru. Yeah. And you're setting yourself up for some disappointment because nobody's perfect. And so it becomes problematic. Yeah. On so many levels. So as soon as you realize that practice means we have to take responsibility for our actions rather than just surrendering to another person, we have to stand on our own and make our own choices and be responsible, take responsibility for our actions.
Is that something that you learned through placing people on a pedestal?
Yeah.
Like either Pattabhi Jois or like the people in the Hare Krishna, and then you going, this isn't healthy.
Well, Pattabhi Jois, I didn't put him on a pedestal in that way. I loved being around him, and I was inspired by him to practice, and there was a joy and energy he brought to the room. But as a Hare Krishna, it was a whole nother thing. It was an acknowledgement of a guru. Yeah. And Pattabhi Jois, honestly, he never said to call him guru. And it's just a title. It's like even in India, a lot of people give great reverence to their math teacher or whatever, right? They'll touch the feet of their teacher. It's a way of giving respect. But I gained another understanding of what it is to have a guru as a person, right? And it's deep because you surrender fully with the idea that this is a representative of God. Yeah. And it's thought that they are a transparent via medium, that if you're pure enough, then the purity of God's message can come through, right? All of that. I understand the concept, and don't deny that there might be people out there that have that level of transparent via mediumness, but it's ultimately coming back around and taking responsibility. And there's all kind of problems. Just look through history, all the people that become a guru, that becomes problematic, right?
Well, it's true. I mean, when you look at, to be fair, I've got friends, really close friends, who had Pattabhi Jois as Guruji at the core of their heart. So they had him there, even though, and I know people like you who didn't. This is the thing. But so there was a level placed on him of the guru, right? And
Yeah.
I think it's interesting that you didn't. He was a nice guy to be in a room, but I think you're right. When I think he must have I mean, he must have taken that on because he had so many people there who were, you know, touching his feet, doing all, you know,
Well,
that
but you
kind of
have to
thing.
understand also it's cultural. He had a guru.
Yeah,
He used to say, my guru, talking about Krishna, my guru, very hard man. You know, he talked about Krishnamacharya as his guru because it's cultural also. He
mm,
touched the feet of his guru. So he's part of a tradition that's accepted. That's what it is.
mm,
Yeah. And so, you know, people would touch your feet. It's thought that you're demonstrating your respect by doing that, etc. And it's all okay if you can do all that without it getting to you. Yeah.
mm,
And um, but he believed he was representing his guru by being a guru. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
And so it's a cultural thing, but it's still
It's
dangerous, right?
problematic, right?
It's
It
problematic from
got
day
really
one, but it's
problematic.
not. But let's go beyond Krishna stuff. Being a pope is a dangerous position, or a bishop, or you know, any leader of any. You get like the president, the prime minister. When you're put in these positions of power, it's a really dangerous place to be.
It
Because
is.
it's like rock climbing with no ropes. You have no room for error. One little mistake and you're tumbling off the mountain.
Mm.
And
I,
so it's a very rare personality that can survive all of that.
hold that. I mean, it's relevant, but I think it's relevant because it is an Ashtanga yoga, and then we did have a guru, and you know, it did get really messy, right? And I'm just wondering, like, what you think, like, what's how do we hold the tenderness of that kind of fallout of what happened with the with Pataba Joyce, and you know, how do you move forward?
Well,
I
maybe you
just
need to be more specific with the question just for listeners that don't know what you're talking about.
Well, I just kind of like think about how do we move forward with the tenderness of like the fact that at one point he's revered by people, and by other in other to other people he hurt them very much and hurt them deeply, and I
So
think this is
what
the
you're
thing.
speaking of is Patabi Joyce made all of these inappropriate adjustments, yeah. Touching inappropriately.
Well, what it seems to be like, you know, people receive them as sexual
Yeah.
abuse. Yeah.
So
And I think that's the thing, you know, I think how do we as like as a community sit with that and move forward in a way that is helpful, that kind of holds that, but you know, but
sure. Well, there's a
practices in a way
variety
that's
of things to discuss about that. First, I didn't see it happen because remember, I was gone for 12 years. So, however, I will also say that I don't deny it happened. One of the worst things you can do is to look at one of these people and say, no, that never happened. You're making it up. No, you have to acknowledge, wow. And I'll have to say, I am so sorry. That's horrible. He should not touch anyone like that. Yeah. And so these things that occurred should not have occurred. Yeah.
mm,
There's no other way to say it. And it becomes very complicated and it's a lot of energy and feelings and emotion around it, right? Um, and what's weird is like I'll speak with Nancy Gilgoff, who's been doing this longer than anyone, and there were other people that received the same adjustment and said, I didn't feel anything. Yeah. And someone else will feel extreme discomfort or it was sexual abuse. I'm not justifying anything he did, but people were comparing him to like Harvey Weinstein or something. It wasn't, he never had sex with a student. It's not like you went in his office and he's naked and masturbating in front of you. He made these adjustments in a room with other people, inappropriate. He shouldn't have done it, but there's varying degrees of this stuff. And um, I'm not defending him. As I said, I've never adjusted anyone like that. No one else in his family adjusts anyone like that. His son Manju doesn't adjust like that. His son Sharat, his grandson Sharat doesn't. His daughter Saraswati doesn't. I don't know any Ashtanga teachers that adjust that way. So it's something he did which should have never happened. I feel horrible for the people that had that experience. I wish there was some way I could remove the pain of their experience. And I have had people approach me and say, David, as an Ashtanga person, you can never use his name again. You can never acknowledge him at all. Or you are then, if you do, you are denouncing anything that happened to these other people, and you are against the whole Me Too movement. I've had people say to me, David, if you do not remove his photo from your book, I will never buy your book again, because you are then holding this guy up and saying, something about him. Now, what am I supposed to do? Say, I just made this stuff up? That Ashtanga yoga just appeared to me in a dream and I never studied with him? Rather, I say, we humans have an ability to hold two conflicting ideas simultaneously in our brain. I can denounce everything he did and also acknowledge that millions of people, probably millions or hundreds of thousands of people, never would have known about Ashtanga yoga that are benefiting and saving people's lives had it not been for him. So you can acknowledge the good aspects of what he accomplished and all the people he inspired, and denounce the negative stuff he did. And people said, well, you still talk about him in workshops. And I go, but you're telling me to lie. I'm telling you my experiences with him. I'm not denouncing anyone else's experience. I encourage people, talk about your experience. I've had this conversation in workshops and things. And this is one of maybe the only recorded moment where I've spoken about this. I've been criticized. Oh, David didn't come out publicly and speak about this stuff. I've been speaking about this stuff all over the planet. I just don't speak about it publicly and put it on social media because people take things out of context and get all fired up about it. But I've addressed it all over the place, right? And the way that you can go forward is say, Pattabhi Jois is not Ashtanga yoga. He's a guy. If you feel strongly, then don't put his photo in your yogashala, but separate the practice from the guy. I have friends that used to do Bikram yoga. But Bikram was not he had a lot of problems and things he did that were not acceptable. But I said to them, but do you feel good when you do Bikram yoga? You don't have to sleep with the man. Go in, do Bikram yoga. Yeah. So the way that you move forward is look at there's a difference between the practice and the man. But I can't deny that I studied with him and I learned this system from him and I had these experiences. Yet I also support people that had some other experience and want to talk about that, because you need to see the whole picture, the big picture of it. And I acknowledge that there's a lot of there can be anger and frustration and disappointment and all of that, and it is heartbreaking, yeah, because it's something that can be so beautiful. So I believe that everyone has to find their way, and some people will never want to do Ashtanga because of that. There's a lot of people coming to Ashtanga now that never knew him, right? There's people that never met him. There's people that had bad experience with him. It's all real. I'm a teacher of this system of yoga. I think it's a valuable tool. I still speak about him just like I speak about other people in my life that I learned things from. Even with the Hare Krishnas, right? I didn't it wasn't all positive. And there's other facets of it. Like I've seen studios that, well, they remove Pattabhi Jois, but they'll have a big picture of Krishnamacharya in the room. Krishnamacharya was mean. He beat and kicked and slapped students, beat them up. Pattabhi Jois used to tell a story. He said he was traveling with Krishnamacharya, and Krishnamacharya is this scholar, right? Sanskrit scholar, authority on Vedic philosophy. And they were traveling, and Pattabhi Jois was his young disciple. They cleared with a machete a place in a field, and Krishnamacharya told Pattabhi Jois, go to Kapotasana, which is this deep back bend, right? You're on your knees, you lean back, and you grab hold of your heels with your head on the earth. Krishnamacharya stepped onto his stomach and gave a philosophical discourse for 30 minutes. There was this stick in the ground, a sharp stick, in Pattabhi Jois's shoulder, embedding deeper and deeper and deeper like a knife in his shoulder. He would show us the scar. And he recounts the incident, said, oh, coming, some pain is coming, some bloods are coming, dirt I'm putting. He just rubbed dirt in the hole in his shoulder. I'm like, wow, that sounds extreme, but okay. And imagine 40 years later, some student says, oh, my knees hurt. And he's like, whatever. I don't see any bones hanging out of your body. And I thought, well, maybe he exaggerated. I heard B.K.S. Iyengar give a talk at a big yoga conference, and he said how mean his teacher was, that he hit them and slapped them and beat them. I was like, wow, okay, physical abuse. I heard Desikachar, Krishnamacharya's own son, give a talk. And if you know Desikachar's history, he didn't do yoga till much later in his life, right? Well, I found out why. He said, when I was a kid, my dad wanted me to do yoga. I didn't much feel like doing yoga, so I ran out in the yard and I hid in a tree in the yard. Well, he knew where I was. He waited till I got tired and came down from the tree. He put me in Baddha Padmasana, so lotus position, hands behind your back, grab your feet. He tied my hands to my feet and left me in the yard for 3 hours. So I really didn't want to do yoga. So I'm looking, going like, wow, that's abuse. But somehow that's accepted because people still have Krishnamacharya's pictures. I'm not justifying any of it. I'm just saying that do the practice that makes you feel good. And the people along the way, Pattabhi Jois, he shouldn't have done that stuff. I'm angry at him for doing that kind of stuff. From the early days of my running teacher trainings, which I've been doing for 30 years, I have always said, when giving adjustments, we must avoid the high voltage areas of the body. Don't touch the groin, don't touch the chest, these areas off limits. And that's not in response to anything else. That was just always the way that I taught. So the way to go forward is to feel the benefits from the practice. And then each person is going to have to feel how they need to respond to these stories in a way that they feel healed or not, and find the benefits from the practice. And if they don't find that, then they'll probably stop doing Ashtanga. A group of us we used to do something called the Ashtanga Yoga Confluence. And it was a whole bunch of teachers. Nancy Gilgoff, Manju Joyce, Richard Freeman, Richard's wife, Mary Taylor, Eddie Stern, myself, Dina Kingsburg from Australia. We all taught together. And one of these events was right after all this came out. We dedicated a whole day to this. The whole panel of us up there, everyone in the audience, hundreds of people could ask questions about it. They went as far as having a psychotherapist on site in a hotel room, that anybody felt they had any type of abuse could go there for free and consult with these people. It was addressed, straight up, where people say, oh, it wasn't addressed. It was addressed like right there in this public format, right? So I don't know how many more things I can say about it, but it's complex. Yeah,
it is complex, and I appreciate you kind of like leading into it, and because I think it's it's like, I don't think we can carry on, right? But we almost have, there's a filter of it, and I've spoken to enough. I mean, I've spoken to enough of the senior teachers over the last 5 years, and a lot of them I went to Bali to speak to, like the people over there on the conference, and there was to know that there was a big problem, and that there was, and it's complex. And I know of people who said, yeah, it was a big problem. Other people said there was no problem. So it's really, as we move forward, and I think as we move forward over the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years, however many years of practice this goes on, it's just like, I think you're right. It comes back to what you said about the practice being a guru, and how can we just feel where the practice is coming out of us, how that, coming back to you saying the breath, that each breath we come back to, we remember, we hear, is a guru. And I think that's a really powerful message.
Well, the practice itself works. Albert Einstein was not a faithful husband, according to, accounts of his actions with, and so does it mean that the theory of relativity is not true? There's two different things. There's that person and there's this system that seems to be working for many. And so Patabi Joyce is dead. He's not here to defend himself. There would be no defense anyway, but there's the practice. Yeah. And so put your focus on that. And like I said, no one else in Ashtanga I'm aware of is adjusting anyone in this manner. And it's available. It's a tool that's beautiful, and people are going to make choices. Even the person that said remove his photo from your book, I said you can tear the page out. Easy, right? I mean, it's all complicated.
No, I appreciate
like many things in life. It's complicated.
I appreciate you speaking to it, David. Yeah, I know it's not easy, and it's like, and it's not easy, and it should be. This is the point. It's but I think what we have is we have a practice that like we have a practice that aligns us. We have a practice that moves us. We have a practice of yoga that comes from that. If we can still land and still feel really grounded and alive in our body, and I think you're right. I think the practice itself is the way that we we join and we connect, and like you said, that idea comes back to that idea, like you said in 1999, the breath. The practice is the same thing. It's the unification of what it means to. It's why we're talking, right? Do you know what I mean? It's why
we're speaking.
And why we're speaking.
The Hare Krishna movement. There were multiple gurus after the founder died, and he had appointed these other guys in his stead. A bunch of them had problems. There were sexual abuse of children and all kind of other things by gurus. Look what's happened in the Catholic Church or other things, right? It doesn't mean that Catholicism doesn't work. It means you had some bad actors in there, right?
Yeah.
And so it doesn't mean that being a Hare Krishna, you have to be a child abuser, but people are flawed. And when they're in a position of power, only the few could not be swayed by that. Yeah. And so that's where I come back to the guru is not a person. As soon as you make it a person, it's problematic.
So when if we were looking to look at the, like how long have you been doing this now?
So I've been doing Ashtanga yoga for 50 years. I'm 66 now. I started when I was 16, 50 years. Wow. I'm old. It kind of just hit me like, wow. And I started yoga 3 years before that. So I've been doing yoga for 53 years. Yeah. And I believe it works. I believe it's a tool that works. I'm not an evangelist. I'm not out to save the world with Ashtanga. I don't say it's the best system. If somebody wants to learn about it, I'll share with them. If they don't or think it's bad, I say, okay, we can talk about something else.
And what do you think it is that you think it works for?
Scott, I'm like a caveman. Beneath all this, there's this simple-minded guy that's like, do yoga, feel good. No yoga, don't feel good. Do yoga, right? And honestly, this is the only reason anyone should do this. If when you do it, you finish and you feel better, do it again tomorrow. If you don't, do something else. Don't waste your time. It's a tool.
So when you look at
the tool,
when you've studied the philosophy over the years, it just comes back to that simple thing. It's not about all the color. You talked about the limbs earlier and stuff like that, and then the different states of samadhi and like kaivalya and all that kind of thing. It's just simply about If you feel better, that's great.
Well, I think that should be the foundation. Because what do you want to do something that makes you feel terrible all the time? I mean, and it needs to be something that lights you up. It doesn't mean it's easy. Like if you love playing the piano, well, you got to practice a lot to play the piano to get good at it. It doesn't mean that all the practice was fun, but the end result was inspiring. Here in Austin, Texas, where I live, there's a place called Barton Springs, and the water temperature is the same year round. I think it's maybe 68 degrees. It feels chilly. Yeah. And there's a woman, I'm going to make up numbers. I don't know precisely, but it's irrelevant to the gist of the story. She's swum in that spring every day for like 40 years, except on the day she gave birth to her kids. And so a local newspaper was interviewing her. They go, "That's just incredible." And she goes, "Yeah, I hate cold water." He said, "What?" She goes, "Yeah, I hate cold water." She goes, "Especially in the winters, I'm out there, I'm in my car with the heater on. I have my big fuzzy bathrobe on with my bathing suit under it, but I'm sitting in the car and it's early morning because I got to do this before I go to work. And I'm just, what was I thinking? This is terrible." And they go, "Well, this sounds crazy. Why do you do it then?" She goes, "Because every day when I come out of that water, I feel so alive." So this is the idea that I know on the other end, I'll feel better.
Yeah.
And people say, "Well, why should I do this? Why should I keep doing it, David?" I say, just stop doing it. What? Just go do something else. Play snooker, go, play tennis, pickleball. That's a new thing. Go play pickleball. Go do something else. Forget it. Stop doing yoga. "What do you mean?" I said, "Well, just stop. If you feel better after you stopped, you got your answer." But you also might discover that, wow, when I was practicing, I felt more calm. I felt more level. I felt something else. Now you know why you're doing it. You don't need me to tell you. Don't do this out of guilt that somebody's laying a guilt trip on you that if you don't do it this many days a week, you're a bad person. You fit it into your life and do it in such a way that you become a productive citizen of the planet.
Yeah.
The definition of a yogi that I base all this on is a yogi is one who leaves a place a little nicer than when they arrived. That's it. What does it matter if we do all kind of yoga and the rest of the day we're just mean, selfish, and egotistical? So it needs to somehow foster this attitude and action of giving back and being a positive influence in the world somehow.
And I think that's why honestly, to bring you back to scratching your back a little bit, I think that's why you're so well loved and why you have everyone's just loves David Swenson, because you have this positivity, you have this spirit, this kind of encouragement, this wanting people to really get it, and it comes back from that simple aspect of probably that 13-year-old going, "I just feel a bit better." I feel great. Just everyone do it, you feel great. And I think this is what I'm getting from this conversation is the spirit that you have in you, because it's just this simple, it's as simple as that. Like you said, it's a simple thing. Just breathe deeply and listen to it.
Well, in the world of Ashtanga, I consider myself to be Switzerland. I'm neutral.
We can go to you in tax haven.
Yes. And get some good chocolate and,
exactly.
and a nice watch. But so I'm friends with Manju. I just talked to him. I saw him in Hawaii when he was visiting there with his family. I'm friendly with Sharat. I call him on his birthday. I'm friendly with his mom, Saraswati. I know them all. If Sharat's in America, I go to his class. We go to breakfast after. Yeah. We're all very different, but there's this idea that you have to become members of a particular tribe and it's this tribal thing. And that's what's happening in politics. Why are we surprised that politicians can't get along when yoga people are fighting about trivial nonsense, right?
Yeah.
We're trying our best. none of us are perfect. We are doing our best. And when you put that in perspective and realize, wow, this person, they're doing their best, and maybe you don't agree with everything somebody's doing, but rather my focusing on all the problems in somebody else's life and criticizing that, just turn the mirror around and look inside and try to deal with my own problems, my own imperfections and fissures in my character that need attention more than my trying to fix somebody else or tear someone else down. And so I'm criticized for the exact qualities you were describing, though. Oh, Swenson, he's just a funny guy, like there's a belief that if you're silly or funny or if things are simple, that it's somehow not valid. That true knowledge has to be confusing, maybe a little frightening and intimidating, and only a handful of people can get it, right? I think that's an elitist attitude. Why do things have to be so complicated? There's a way to see beneath it, the complexity. The greatest teachers I've had that I learned the most from in life had this uncanny ability to convey complex ideas in simple terms. They make the most boring of subjects interesting. And I realized as a teacher, if you want to frighten, intimidate, or confuse people, that's actually easy. But if you want to inspire and facilitate a hunger for learning by giving the seeds that sprout into questions in a student's mind and heart, that's a good thing. Rather than just pouring answers into someone, even look, Patanjali Sutras is not a book of answers. Why is it that Patanjali Sutras, well, I know you've read, I'm going to say to your listeners, Scott, have you ever read Patanjali Sutras? People say, oh, yeah, bro, right?
Yes,
okay.
I have, David.
You have. Okay, great. And that book that you read, was it just Patanjali Sutras, or was it Patanjali Sutras with commentary? You never just get the sutras. You get Patanjali says one sentence, and then you have some commentator writing 37 pages explaining what Patanjali just said. Was Patanjali such a lame, inept communicator that he requires people all around him to explain what he just said? Or was it written this way purposefully? Because it's not a book where you read and you get an answer. You read something and it makes you go, now you've got to question and think about it and figure it out on your own. And if you read Patanjali Sutras and had this commentary with it, get 10 different versions and they're all saying something a little different. So you realize at some point, well, your understanding of it is more valid than another person's. So we like to feel that, oh, this is deep, man, because, wow, Scott, did you hear that speaker the other night, man? When we were in London, we went and we heard this great scholar. He gave this incredible lecture. Wow, it was mind-blowing, man. I didn't understand a word he said. But we think this person, wow, they're the real deal because nobody can understand what they're talking about except a handful of other people. But what's the benefit of that knowledge if nobody else knows what they're talking about except a handful of other people? So the greater communicators have this ability to present complex ideas in a way that's, oh, ding, a little light bulb goes off, or a question pops up or something.
This is great. And I think there's something, I mean, it just, I'm taking a leap, but it could be just as simple as like wanting that same feeling you had for yourself, just for others. That's it. Just feel better. It comes back to that. Just feel better. You feel better.
When people
do it more, it's like brushing your teeth, anything like that. You do it because it's good. You know, it's good for you. that kind of thing. But I just,
On occasion, people have asked me to sign their book. I generally say, have fun practicing.
yeah.
Because if you enjoyed your practice today, it's not actually a discipline. I'll say, I don't consider myself a disciplined person because I liked to do the yoga and I like to surf. It's not like you had to force me to go surfing. I liked it. And so my brother and I practiced in such a way that it was fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Ashtanga, it was challenging, man. It was hard, but somehow it was fun. The environment I grew up in, man, I felt like I had just become members of this tribe that was so fun and welcoming. We hung out and we had meals together and we went to the beach together and we did yoga and we'd try yoga postures and fall out of them and laugh like little kids in the playground. And what's happened is somehow there's a newer generation that they've squeezed the joy right out of the practice. And what's left is some rules and regulations, and students are a little frightened and intimidated. And I'm like, wow, I don't know. I think it's better to find a way to present this yoga that's so difficult in a way that's pleasant and fun, and you'll want to keep doing it. So that's always been my sort of
I think you do it so well. You do it so well. It's a thing again and again. People just keep coming back because of that, that way that you have. As we get near the end, I'm really interested if, like, because it's 50 years, right? If the David now would have anything different to say to the David at 13.
Would I say something different?
What would you say to the David at 13 if there's anything different?
Wow, 13-year-old David, enjoy that nice long hair you've got. It's all going to fall out. Keep having fun, man. Pursue your dreams. Don't let people get you down.
This is what I thought you were going to say. It's great.
But it's yeah, you know what? I say this, but I don't think I'd change things. Because even if you knew some way now to avoid the problems that you were going to go through as a youth, you might not be the same person. There's a lot to be learned for all those moments of confusion and angst and dreams that you go, and then the dream is just blown up because something, falls flat, or these people or the loves that you had that you're sure this is the one, and you throw your heart and it's all comes crumbling down, or whatever it is, the gurus and the people and the things. Why change that? Because that's what builds our character. You know who Matthew Perry is? The character on Friends, Chandler
on Friends.
He's got a book. I bought it actually. It's powerful because I heard him on a talk show and it was beautiful, because we tend to see these people just as their character on these shows, right? He went through a lot of struggles and drug addiction and near-death experiences, and anybody that goes through that stuff, they've had a valuable experience, right? And he said he was at some award show or something, or another presenter, and I don't remember precisely who he said it was, so I don't want to say a name and have it be wrong, but this other guy, this other actor, told Matthew Perry a story. I guess Matthew Perry must have been talking about some struggles or something. And this other colleague of his says, there's a story. And this man, he goes to heaven, and there's St. Peter. And St. Peter looks at this guy and says, do you have any scars? And the man, with great pride, he says, no, I'm untainted. I have no scars anywhere. And St. Peter says, why? Was there nothing in life worth fighting for? That was kind of powerful. You realize that these scars we have, right? These are character building moments. And so even looking back at this young kid, just go, you got to keep going. You're going to get knocked down. That's okay. Yeah. You're going to have this happen and that happen. And you just find a way to carry on. And so, yeah, advising that kid outside of the be prepared for the hair loss and other things. There was an interesting question. You might try this with some listeners or some other presenters at some point. I know we're probably almost out of time, but they were asking the same question to a bunch of teachers, and it was this: what do you know for certain? What do you know for sure? Yeah, that was the question. Interesting question. But my answer was, well, I know for certain that if I pull a hair out of my nostril, my eyes are going to water. I know for certain that the most spiritual people I have ever met in my life, without exception, have never been the person telling me, I am the most spiritual person you're ever going to meet. Yeah. That there's these truths like that are, but outside of that, the big questions of life, and maybe we can wrap it up on this. After all of my quests and endeavors and chanting and yoga, I have found answers to some of the big questions I asked. And then I also gained peace with the lack of answers for others, with the realization that answers are ultimately overrated. We seek answers, we strive, we want the answers to these questions. But if you look back in your life, the real juice is in the question itself. The word question contains the word quest. It means we're going to keep trying to improve. And honestly, you have a question, a good answer to a question should give birth to 3 new questions. That answer should make some new questions. That's what keeps us growing and moving. And so to question Ashtanga yoga, to question why to do it, to question your purpose in life, to question things, keep doing it, man. Don't stop asking. Keep changing, keep questioning, keep going. If you've ever been around somebody that thinks they know everything, they're a real drag and a bore to be around. And the moment we become that person that we think we know everything, we're going to be that real drag of a boring person to be around. And we suddenly seal our container so there's no more potential to learn anything. So better to keep the questions alive.
And I think that answers my last question I was going to have for you anyway, was what does it mean to live a contemplative life? To keep asking questions.
Keep asking questions. And then even when we get an answer, you realize that, well, maybe it wasn't quite that. They're not always, answers aren't always definitive. And it's, imagine when we were born, we had some book, each of us. So you and I are born and you get the book, the answers to all of Scott's questions of life, and I get the answers to all of David's questions of life. And you have a question, you just look in there and there's the answer. Or maybe the first time someone back in the history of humanity had these questions, they had the realizations and they just wrote them down. So nobody ever has to have these questions again because the answers were written there. Then what is life? It's these questions that help us to grow and become these unique, crazy individuals that are trying to sort this stuff out. And it makes for the diversity on the planet and the wonder and beauty of our myriad facets of life and stages and endeavors and our enthusiasm at this point in the practice where we thought it was that, and oh, it's actually that, and it's evolution. Yeah.
Thank you, David.
Thank you, Scott. It's a pleasure.
I appreciate you sharing and being so open.
All right. I look forward to seeing you in person next time I'm in England. Yeah, and maybe we'll get to do some Mysore classes or something in your studio. It'd be fun.
That would be great. Yeah, you could just kind of give me a shout if you're up for it. I'd love you to do a Mysore program. I think it would be really, really, really profound and beautiful.
Be fun.
Yeah, Just keep in touch. I'll let you know when this is going to drop. But I appreciate you openness, man. Take care.
All the best, respect, love to you and all of your
Thank you.
listeners. Let's go out there and prove that not only can we gain some personal benefit from yoga, but just maybe if enough of us do this, we can make the world just a little better place.
Thanks,
Love
brother.
and respect.
For you. Love and respect to you. Bye.